Can you run outside or wide zone from the shotgun? For a long time, the answer was no, but things have changed over the last 10 years, and in this video, we're going to dive into some of the careful considerations that need to be made when attempting to run outside zone from the shotgun. So there are a few things to consider when running outside zone or wide zone from the shotgun. And the first thing we need to consider is, why would we do it in the first place? Why would we get out from under center, or why would we get out of the pistol to get in the shotgun for outside zone? The biggest reason for me is that from under center and the pistol, the quarterback has to turn his back to the defense. Now, I do like the quarterback turning his back for certain things, for sure play action off of that. But when the quarterback's back is turned to the defense, it prevents him from being able to do a few things. Number one, we can't read option. So for me, read option and RPOs are exclusive, and that's the other thing that we can't do. We can't post snap RPO. Read option for me is a first level read. The quarterback is either handing the ball off or keeping it. Post snap RPO, obviously he's either handing it off or throwing it. But with his back to the defense, he can't do either of those things. You could still pre-snap an RPO. You can even have the quarterback still pre-snap, know he's going to throw, fake the handoff, turning his back to the defense, and then make his throw. Or you can just catch and throw either way, but that's a pre-snap RPO. And we have different purposes for pre and post snap RPOs, but with his back to the defense, a post snap RPO is not possible. With his back to the defense, a read option is not possible. Once that back is turned, unless we have already predetermined a throw somewhere else and given the quarterback the option to turn his back to the defense first, once that back is turned, he is handing it off, and there is no other read element that can be a part of it. So for me, the biggest reason that I would want to be in the shotgun for outside zone is to be able to add more read elements to a base play. Something that we talk about a lot at the high school level for offense is one play, many ways. And one of the best ways to run the same play many ways is to have some read elements, different read elements off of it that can counterattack what the defense is doing to try and prevent a base run play. So we know we want to get in the shotgun, but what are the issues that it actually presents? And this is the reason that for a long time it was said that it couldn't be done, and it's because of the relationship between the running back and the center. Oftentimes, outside or wide zone is referred to as a dance between the running back and the offensive line, and when they're out of sync, just like any dance couple that's out of sync, it doesn't work. When the ball is snapped, based on where they're standing at that time, they are in alignment. But from the shotgun, it doesn't matter where we line up our running back in the gun. You might be somebody likes him directly behind the guard or outside leg, inside leg of the guard. I like mine to start in the B gap, and we'll adjust him based on the running back that we have. But either way, he is not directly behind the center at the snap, and the entire time he's playing catch up to get to that point. And that is something that needs to be taken into consideration when thinking about running outside or wide zone from the shotgun. Because of that misalignment, it's difficult to get the ball carrier to the play side on time. Again, it's a dance. Everything works together. Holes open and close at different points in the play. And again, with that misalignment from the shotgun, sometimes he might not make it to the hole on time before it closes off. Maybe we're running to a 3 technique, and if we were in the pistol or we were under center, we would be able to get outside of the 3 technique before he penetrates. But from the gun, we're farther away, and he penetrates and cuts off the zone before we can even get to the hole. So it's difficult with that misalignment to get on time to the play side. With this difficulty of being on time, the defense is able to play more downhill because they expect it to cut back. They're expecting that 3 technique or that 4-eye to prevent the ball from getting past the B gap. And we're thinking about outside or wide zone. We're trying to attack the perimeter. We're trying to attack the C and D gaps inside, outside the tight end. But from the gun, sometimes we might not even make it there, even if that's where the hole is designed to be. The defense may be able to cut us off and prevent us from getting there, and that's going to allow the second level to play more downhill. And when we think about outside and wide zone, what is fantastic about the play is being able to separate the defense. We're trying to push the front side, cut off the back side, and create an alley in between. And the way this is done is with forcing the defense to move horizontally, laterally, sideline to sideline. But if they're able to play downhill because that 3 technique, that 4-eye is going to cut us off, then we're not getting that horizontal displacement at the second level at all. We're not going to be able to create an alley. Even if we can create an alley, we may not get there on time because the defense can cut us off and play downhill. So what we're going to take a look at the rest of this video is which specific schemes help to maximize the efficiency when running outside zone from the shotgun. Now, I will say I don't believe any of them are quite as good. The runs don't hit quite as well from the shotgun as they do in the pistol or under center, but certain schemes are better than others, and that's what we're going to dive into. So this is actually a video version of a study I did last offseason with the 2023 49ers. I did this study on my Substack, Wide Zone Warriors. There's going to be a link to that in the description, and in that article, I have all 22 filmed that I can't show on YouTube for fear of getting copyrighted. So be sure to check that out, but don't just jump there and read the article because I do have a bonus at the end. We're going to talk about an alternative play at the end that is not mentioned in that article. So this was a study from the 2023 49ers, and I broke down their shotgun outside zone. You can see the data over here on the right, and we've got a lot of data throughout this video. So what we have over here on the right is which play or which variation of outside zone did they run, how many times did they run it, and what was the average yards per carry there. We're going to dive into each of these schemes specifically and try and take a look at what the numbers represent. If you spend hours each week creating and updating wristbands to match your play call sheet, the automatic wristband play call sheet system is for you. All you have to do is fill out your call sheet as you game plan, and the wristbands automatically fill in to match. Because the wristbands are linked to the play call sheet, you never have to comb through and make sure the wristbands match. With 9 formations and 16 plays per formation, you can be sure that you have enough in your game plan to defeat your opponent without so much that you can't practice at all. Whether you're in the off season and have time to adjust to a new call sheet, or you're in season and need more time to spend with family on the weekend or more time scouting your opponent, this automatic wristband play call sheet system is for you. You can find a full demonstration of this time-saving system in the link down below. So we're starting with the base version of outside zone, and that would kind of be called 2 things. To the strong side, it could be stretch, and to the weak side, it would be Wanda. Now, whenever I was tagging the film last year, I didn't really differentiate between strong side and weak side runs, so this is kind of a catch-all between the two, but for the most part, these runs were Wanda. They were weak, and the primary purpose of that is you have a tight end, the Y backside, and he's able to block the backside defensive end. If you've got a 6-man blocking surface and a 4-2 defense, you're 6 for 6. With the tight end blocking that backside defensive end, there's no need for a read option, so they were able to call it and run it. And as you can see on the table on the right, over half of these runs hit backside. So we've got all the gaps listed here. I basically made a hit chart. So the farthest hitting run that we've got categorized would be the play side E gap. That would be outside of a wing to a tight end wing surface. D gap outside the tight end. C gap outside the tackle. PS means play side. BS means backside. And you can see where all of these runs hit. And over half of these runs for the base version, again, primarily Wanda, but also a couple strong side versions in here too, most of them hit backside. Now the best runs, as you can tell by the numbers, the backside D gap hit all the way behind the backside tight end. So we've got the tight end there to lock the box to give us 6 for 6. And the best runs cut all the way behind him, all the way out the backside D gap is the only time we averaged more than 3.5 yards on a carry. And in total at the bottom, you can see 20 runs and averaging 3 yards a carry. That's not very good. Yes, 3 yards 4 times is 12 yards, but 3 yards per carry is not a world that most rushing offenses want to live in. And the reason for this is that there was difficulty in separating the defense. Like we talked about in some of those issues, it's very difficult to get to the front side. And with the expectation of the cutback, there's going to be a lot of difficulty in pushing the front side, cutting off the backside, and creating an alley in between to separate the defense. I'll also have diagrams for these runs to kind of give us an idea. This is Wanda. You can see there's a 6-man box. This is drawn up against more of an odd front, but you can also imagine the left defensive end being in a 5, the nose being in a 1 to the left side, and the right side defensive end being in a 3, and now you've got that 4-2. The next most called run was Zorro, and they ran Zorro a lot of different ways. Now Zorro is great because it's designed for the play side C gap. That's really important. You see the numbers, the data over here on the right. Of the 16 times that it was run, 12 of those times, 75% of the time, it at least made it to the B gap. So Zorro was really good for making it to the point of attack. What Zorro does, and we're going to see a theme here, what Zorro does is it allows the offensive line to seal in the front. I've got a diagram of Zorro on the next slide. We can see how it's going to give the offensive line that ability, but with the offensive line being able to focus on that, they can really be aggressive and prevent penetration that's going to keep the running back from making it to the alley that's being created. And like I mentioned, they ran a few different variations of this: cat, toss, and top. Cat tells the fullback and tight end combo to work to the play side corner instead of the play side support defender, the force defender. Toss is going to be same side toss from the gun. So if we're running Zorro to the left, 19 Zorro, the running back's going to line up on the left side and the quarterback's going to toss it out there, no read. And this is great to be able to outrun the play side penetration. Again, if you've got the running back lined up in the B gap and you toss it all the way out there, really penetration inside the C gap doesn't really have an effect on the play. They also ran top, and this is that spinner handoff behind the quarterback. They could do it a couple ways, either hand it off to the running back behind the quarterback or a orbit motion and hand it off to the orbit motion receiver, most often Deebo Samuel. And the top runs got the ball carrier too deep for play side penetration. So with the ball carrier getting behind the quarterback, penetration inside the B gap or the A gap didn't really matter because we were going to outrun it to the play side because we were so deep that it wasn't really going to impact the path of the ball carrier. So what was so successful about Zorro that contributed to a 4.25 much better yards per carry mark is that the scheme and the different tags allowed time for the ball carrier to get to the play side. So the issue with base, whether it was stretch or Wanda, is that once it was cut off, there wasn't really much the offense could do. But because of the nature of Zorro, the alley stayed open longer. The offensive line is able to seal in the front and separate the defense, cut off the defense essentially from the B gap backward. And then the tight end and fullback are going to push that front side to create the alley. And we can see a couple different variations here. Left side is classic Zorro. The right side is what I mentioned, the orbit motion into the top, the spinner handoff. And I think these are really great diagrams to get that image of creating the alley. So you see on the left side, 18 Zorro, we've got the right guard and the right tackle on a double combo, taking the defensive end to the plug linebacker. The right tackle, because it's Zorro, knows that he doesn't have to worry about the will or the free safety. So he can be really aggressive on that defensive end, play him really thick, and make sure that the plug linebacker can't scrape over. The play side tackle on Zorro's job is essentially to make sure that nothing scrapes over him, that nothing makes it to the C gap. Then we've got the X outside to handle the corner, and all that's left is the will and the free safety here for the tight end and the fullback. So this is a 21 personnel run. The tight end and the fullback are going to combo even though the fullback's in the backfield. The tight end, knowing he has inside help from the fullback, is going to play really aggressive outside on the will, because if he loses inside, the fullback is going to clean it up. Now, what often happens here is the will outside linebacker, he is taught to not get reached, right? That's one of the main coaching points here, especially against a Shanahan style offense. So he's going to kind of hang around, and then the fullback's going to come through, knock the will over outside of the tight end, and then lead up on the free safety. So the tight end and the fullback are going to push the front side, the will and the free safety here. The play side tackle, play side guard, and the rest of the offensive line is going to make sure that none of those 5 defenders make it to the C gap. So because of the nature of this variation, that C gap alley is going to stay open much longer than it is a variation like stretch or Wanda. Next up is Zelda, or what we now know they call Weasel. This was not the next most run variation. I put it here because it is weak side Zorro. They're kind of cousins. Instead of the fullback comboing with the tight end, he's comboing with the play side tackle. Idea is still the same. The combo is coming with the F from the backfield, he's just comboing with the tackle instead of the tight end. So back when I wrote this article, the Dolphins playbook hadn't been leaked yet, so I just called it Zelda because I knew that that was a term in their offense, but I didn't know exactly what Zelda was at that point. But then it leaked after that, and now we know that's Weasel. And I really like Weasel because weak Zorro, Weasel, it kind of fits. They start a lot of their weak side variations with W, and then that Weasel, you kind of get that, even though it's an S, you kind of get that Z sound in the middle. So you kind of get that idea of weak Zorro, Weasel. Now, since Zorro was a combination between the tight end and the fullback, the point of attack is really the C gap. With Weasel, the point of attack is really the B gap, because the play side tackle is now the one playing really aggressive on the edge defender, and the fullback is leading up inside of that. So it's essentially the same idea. It's just now, instead of the play side tackle back being responsible for the defense not flowing over, it's the play side guard who's responsible for sealing in the front. And you can see some pretty crazy numbers over here on the right. Very similar to Zorro, the 3 times that it hit the primary point of attack or the next inside gap of the point of attack, it was a very successful run. And I think a large part of this is that the point of attack is closer, but it's also a more consistent point of attack because of the combination from the backfield, the focus on the guard sealing in the defense that you don't get from a base run. Now, unlike Zorro, all 5 of these runs were regular cross-face handoffs. No orbit tops, no tosses, straight running back is lining up on the right, crossing face to run left, or vice versa. Also, all 5 of these did include spirit motion. That's commonly called escort motion. I've made a video calling it blast in the past, but I do call it spirit motion now because it does fit with the jet family, and Spirit being an airline kind of gives it that idea of a full speed motion, and Spirit adds that blocker to the core. So when I'm categorizing runs, I also like to kind of think of premier looks and problem looks. The premier look, what do we ideally want to run this play against? Problem look, what is the front that's going to give us problems? And the premier look for Weasel is to a B gap bubble. And we can see that in this diagram here. The B gap bubble, especially with a cat scheme, is going to allow the fullback and the play side tackle to actually work to the corner, because with the wildcat scheme, the X is going to be cracking the free safety. And then from play side guard to backside tight end, everybody's focused on sealing in the front. You've got the play side guard and center working the 1 technique to the play side inside linebacker, backside guard and tackle working the 3 to the backside inside linebacker, and the tight end manning up the defensive end in this 4-2. Next up, we've got force, and force is very similar to Zorro as well, except instead of the tight end and fullback comboing to the force defender, the F, the fullback, is simply isolating him. So it's no combo. The fullback is responsible for the support defender, the strong safety, and the tight end and the 5 offensive linemen are responsible for the front. Now, they did run a couple different variations of this. They did run some force cat and what I called back then some force crack, which now we know as pixel. I've got a diagram of that one. But these numbers are misleading. You can see that we've got 1 run that went outside of a wing that went for 3 yards, 2 runs outside of the tight end that averaged for 9 yards, and then 2 runs that hit inside the tight end and averaged no gain. But overall, 5 runs for 4.2 yards overall is not a bad run. The problem here is that 1 of these runs accounted for 18 of the yards. So 5 runs at a 4.2 average comes out to 21 total yards of the 5 runs, and 18 of those 21 yards, all but 3 yards for this scheme, came off of a single run play, a single rep. So it is important to note, sometimes numbers do lie. This is one of those times. All in all, this was not a good variation to run from the shotgun, and it's because of what the problem look for force really is, and it's a widened edge. With this widened edge, it's difficult for the fullback to actually make his block on the support defender with the running back on time. So what would end up happening on a lot of these runs is by the time the fullback clears the blocking surface to go make his block, it's too late, and the B gap, the 3 technique, has cut off the run. So the running back isn't even running behind his lead blocker. Force is great if you know you're going to be able to capture the edge from the play side tight end back. You know that the play side tight end is going to be able to reach the edge defender, and then you've essentially got your fullback leading around the edge for the next guy to come off it, basically. But with a widened edge defender, the wide nines that everybody's playing right now, you're not getting outside of him. You're not going to get outside the wide nine, so the fullback even has to cut up inside of him. 3 techniques very often now are really playing 2 gap, and their goal is to cut off the zone. They're trying to cut it off in the B gap and then fall back into the A gap. And when that happens, the running back, like I said, is not actually running behind his lead blocker. So a couple answers to this: you can either crack that widened edge and run the pixel variation. You can run Zorro to make sure that the offensive line can seal in the front like we talked about, and we can still get up to the same defender just with a better scheme on the way. Now, one of the issues that they had with pixel is that it still requires the offensive line to seal the front, but doesn't give them the tools to do so. Pixel still really has a lot of offensive linemen working more play side than backside, and it's hard to reach play side defenders. That's what I love about Zorro, is a lot of times you're working more to the backside. You're just trying to basically beat them before they scrape over. But with Force and even the pixel variations, you're oftentimes asking offensive linemen to reach defenders that are already on the play side, as opposed to Zorro, where you're asking them to block defenders that are backside and you're just preventing them from making it to the play side. So here are examples of both. You can see Force on the left and Pixel on the right. And with Force over here on the left side, you can still see the defensive end outside of the tight end, and you can see the path that the fullback is supposed to take to the strong safety. If the tight end doesn't get that defensive end reached, it's very hard to get to the point of attack on time, especially when you consider that this is drawn up from the I formation and not from the shotgun like we're talking about in this video. On the right side, you see Pixel, and from the fullback back, this actually looks like a pretty good play. The fullback gets to pin the will, and like we talked about, doesn't happen very often with Pixel. Because of the front here, the right guard and right tackle actually really get to focus on sealing in the mic. Now, that's not the issue here, and it's also not the only issue that the 49ers had with Pixel in 2023. Another one of the issues they had was this exchange block between the X and the Z. There were 1 or 2 reps where the X or whoever was responsible for the nickel on the crack scheme. So the nickel penetrated and made the play in the backfield because we're asking receivers to block at the point of attack. And while the Rams have been very successful with it, they also draft that prototype. They also draft receivers that are supposed to block. They're not asking Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel to block. They're asking 6'2", 210, 220-pound receivers, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua to block. Very different archetype. Same with the Dolphins. Yes, their 2 primary receivers are Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Those aren't the receivers that are blocking. If they have a receiver blocking, it's most often Cedric Wilson, who also fits that archetype, 6'3", 210, 220, not the 6 foot, 200-pound receivers like Ayuk and Deebo. Next up, we've got Zap. And Zap is a 1-back outside zone to a 4 or 5-man surface. So we've got a tight end, wing, and maybe another wing outside of the first one. And what this does is it is going to force a bubble in either the C or D gap. Different fronts might align to it different ways, but generally there's going to be a bubble in one of those 2 locations nearly any time that you are in, especially a 4-man surface, a tight end wing. So similar to Zorro, and why it starts with a Z, because they're kind of characterized together. The tight end and the fullback who would be playing the wing are responsible really for widening the edge. Because of the numbers, the offensive line gets to seal in the front, and again, you've got the crease, the alley in between those 2. You can see the data on the right side. That's where 3 of the 5 runs hit the D gap or the C gap, and they were very successful. 11.5 yards between 2 runs for the D gap, and 1 run for 6 yards hit the C gap. Now, it is better from 3x1, where you can run cat with it as well and take the Z receiver, crack the strong safety, and take the Y and the F on the way to the corner. You can really create an alley there because you're able to account for all of the DBs as opposed to 2x2, where you're going to have 1 DB, a corner that you can't account for. Now, philosophically, I don't mind leaving corners unblocked, I'm of the firm belief if corners could tackle, they would play safety, especially at the high school level, but I'm never going to complain about having somebody to account for them either. So here is Zap. You can see the fullback motioning out of the backfield to a wing position, and here the defense decided for the bubble to be in the C gap. So the fullback is going to take the Sam, tight end and left tackle are going to work the defensive end to the Mike, and there's your alley really there in the C gap. Lastly, we're going to talk about Sift, and you can already probably notice the numbers on the right side being very different. Sift is outside zone split zone, and it had a backside hit rate of 75%. So 3 out of 4 runs that were split zone, that were Sift, hit backside for the 49ers in 2023. And the one that didn't make it all the way to the backside almost did, hitting the play side A gap. And this is partially by design. Sift does have a backside point of attack. The separation of the front is really supposed to occur backside between the offensive line and the Sift block. So with Sift, the offensive line is generally working to the man on the play side. So a lot of that is going to widen, a lot of that is going to stretch out. And then the part where you cut the defense off, it might just be the tight end or the fullback sifting back across the line and nailing that backside defensive end. So 4 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. Not too bad, not the best, but I think it could be better, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But here is one version. This is Wiz. This is including with the tight end as the sifter, but they did also run some with the fullback and a widened out tight end. But you get the idea here that the offensive line, like I said, is working more to the play side. The center and the backside guard, the right guard are working the one technique to the play side linebacker. The right tackle is trying to reach a Mike that is aligned to his play side and probably at least starting a couple steps to the play side till they see the Y sifting back across, and then you can see their run fits changing after that. But just mechanically, a lot of this is going to get washed out to the left and force a cut back to the right. Even if it goes, like we said, all the way between the backside C gap, that might just be where the separation occurs. So before we get to the bonus play at the end, let's talk about some conclusions we can make from this data. So the biggest thing that stands out to me is that the best schemes to run outside zone from the shotgun keep the alley open long enough for the ball carrier to reach it. These were Zorro and Weasel, which is what they call it now. I called it Zelda in that study. These runs all share characteristics in that they allow at least part of the offensive line to focus more on defenders that are backside of them and prevent them from scraping over to the play side, as opposed to a base run, stretch, wanda, or even force, where the offensive line is generally working to a defender on the play side. So instead of having play side leverage on their target linebacker and just fighting to keep that leverage, they have to try and fight to gain that leverage on a defender that is to the play side of them by alignment. And oftentimes what that does is the run is going to get cut off before the running back can get to the alley. It's going to force the cut back, and the running back is not going to make it to the point of attack. These were the 3 best that allowed the running back to get to the point of attack, and it's because the play side was getting widened, the front was getting sealed in because of the mechanics of the play, and the alley is going to stay open longer. And because the offensive line can focus on just keeping the leverage they already have, they can be really aggressive on the defensive line and not allow that penetration. So most of the other runs ended up on the backside, and this is just a personal belief that if we know the run is going to make it to the backside just because of the mechanics of the play, then I would much rather run inside zone than outside zone. Inside zone, the offensive line is going to force more vertical displacement as opposed to horizontal for wide zone or outside zone. And if we're thinking about base, whether it's stretch or wanda or sift, and we know that the run is probably at least making it backside of the center, we can make the running back's job a lot easier by not making him read it all the way to the play side. We can make the offensive line's job easier because we know that we're blocking for that point of attack. And I think that will be a lot more successful. Now, one of the issues here is that the most popular personnel grouping in football really right now is 11 personnel. Zorro is a 21 personnel run. Weasel at its base is a 20 personnel run. It could be 21, just running it weak away from the tight end, but you at least need a fullback or a Y-off tight end there. Zap is a 12 or 13 personnel run. Those are not variations that are commonly seen Outside of 20, if you consider Y off 11 personnel to be 20 personnel, not a ton of personnel groupings that are very common. So I do want to show an alternative run scheme to outside zone that is a lot more 11 personnel friendly, and that's popcorn. So popcorn is what they call long trap. It goes with pop, which is their one back power, and you can see a diagram of it here on the right. It's an 11 personnel shotgun, one back alternative to stretch or Wanda. So instead of running outside zone to the left here and being worried that the 3 technique is going to penetrate and force us backside, in which case we probably should have just run inside zone anyway, this down and kick scheme is going to provide a consistent point of attack. So we're getting a deuce block on the 3 technique back to the mic. The tight end is going to, act like he's going to block this defensive end and then get up to the Sam, and that's to prevent that defensive end from squeezing and spilling the kick block of the guard here. So the guard's going to be able to get inside the defensive end, and now this run is really going to hit that C-gap area. So keep this in mind as an alternative to running outside zone to the left here, especially if you're having trouble with that 3 technique. This is a great way to have a consistent point of attack. You're still able to RPO here if you get this 6-man box. If you're like me and you're going to see an odd front here with this will down outside the backside tackle and that defensive end in a 4, you could arc that backside tackle and read the defensive end and get some read option elements to it. And if you have this 6-man box, then you can definitely put the Z on a glance here, RPO that strong safety, and you can activate all of those things we talked about in the beginning that would be reasons why we would want to even get in the shotgun to run outside zone in the first place. Again, all of this did come from a study I did last year on my blog, Wide Zone Warriors. In that article, I have film of these plays, the all 22, that I can't show on YouTube anymore for copyright reasons. So be sure to head down to the description, click that link, watch the film, and sign up for the Substack while you're there. Shout out to BenShank8968 for the inspiration for this video. He left a comment asking a question about some of these things from outside zone from the shotgun, and while I did answer it over there, I also felt like it would be a great topic for a video. So if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments in any of my videos. I will for sure answer them there, and who knows, maybe they'll inspire the next video. Now, in that video that he left a comment on, we actually talked about some of the different read elements that we can have off of outside zone, and that would be a reason that you would want to run it from the shotgun. So if you would be more interested in that and expanding on some of the usage of outside zone from the shotgun, be sure to click on the screen to watch that video.